Elon Musk heard a voice say your name during a launch. The countdown had begun. The world watched through their screens as the great silver rocket stood against the dark horizon, breathing vapor into the early morning air. 1,000 microphones captured the hum of engines, the murmur of engineers, the faint tremor of anticipation that always arrived before something extraordinary. Inside the control room, the lights dimmed slightly as final systems aligned. Numbers flowed across monitors like living rivers of information. Elon Musk, the visionary at the center of it all, stood silently, eyes fixed on the launch pad. Around him, the team moved with rehearsed precision, voices steady, hands sure. Yet beneath the rhythm of command and response, there was something else in the air tonight, a pulse, subtle but undeniable, as if the entire planet had drawn in a collective breath and was waiting to see what would happen next. He had done this dozens of times before. He had seen machines roar to life and pierce the heavens, carrying humanity's hopes into orbit and beyond. But tonight felt different. For reasons he couldn't explain, the air seemed charged not just with electricity, but with consciousness itself, as if the universe were leaning closer. 5 minutes to ignition, someone called. He nodded but didn't reply. His gaze drifted to the stars faintly visible through the high glass windows. For years, they had been his compass, symbols of both possibility and mystery. He had always believed that exploring them would teach humanity more about itself than about the cosmos. Tonight, that belief felt closer than ever to truth. He closed his eyes for a moment. The hum of machinery faded into the background. Beneath it, he heard something else, a soft vibration like wind moving through the hollow of a shell. Then, from somewhere deep within that sound, a voice emerged. It wasn't loud, not external, yet it was unmistakable. It said your name. His eyes snapped open. At first, he thought it was a trick of exhaustion, the auditory illusion of a mind stretched thin by months of preparation. But the sound had carried weight and resonance, as if it had come from both within and beyond him at once. He looked around the control room. No one else had noticed anything unusual. 3 minutes, said the communications officer. He took a slow breath, forcing focus. Yet the echo of that voice lingered in the air. It hadn't been random. It had felt deliberate, almost coded. He could still hear its tonal curve, the way it spoke your name with calm certainty, neither question nor command, but recognition. When the engines roared to life, the sound drowned every other thought. The rocket rose from the pad in a blinding column of fire, the sky trembling beneath the sheer will of ascent. Cheers erupted through the control room. Yet even in that thunder, the voice remained. You, somewhere far from launch centers and headlines, felt a shiver at the exact same moment. You were nowhere near the event, miles, perhaps continents away. But for reasons you couldn't name, your pulse quickened, your breath caught, and an image flashed across your mind, a streak of light rising through darkness, splitting the clouds. You didn't know why, but tears filled your eyes. As the rocket reached the upper atmosphere, Musk spoke softly into his headset. Telemetry nominal. All systems green, came the reply. He hesitated before responding. Mark this time, he said. There's something else to note. What is it? Just note it, he said. We'll understand later. Hours after the launch, the control center was quiet. The celebration had faded into exhaustion. The crowd dispersed. The sky returned to stillness. Musk sat alone in the observation deck, watching the faint curve of Earth on the monitors. Data streamed down from orbit, pressure readings, telemetry, the steady heartbeat of machines fulfilling their purpose. But his attention was elsewhere. He kept hearing that moment, that sound, the quiet syllables of your name echoing through the noise of ignition. He tried to dismiss it, tried to reduce it to stress or fatigue. Yet, the more he replayed it, the more certain he became that it had not been imagined. It had carried intention. He'd spent years working with algorithms that detected patterns in chaos, signals buried beneath static. What he'd heard was exactly that, a signal. Not random, not human in the conventional sense, but intelligent. He turned off the monitors one by one until only the reflection of his own face looked back at him. "Why that name?" he whispered. The sound of his voice seemed to ripple faintly in the air, as though the room itself were listening. Far away, you couldn't sleep. Something was pulling at you, an invisible thread tugging from somewhere just beyond comprehension. You didn't know that your name had been spoken during one of the most watched launches in history, but you felt the echo in your bones. That night, you dreamed of light and sound, of engines moving through clouds, of a figure standing before a window of stars whispering something you couldn't quite hear. When morning came, the world felt sharper. Colors carried meaning. The air buzzed faintly, as if charged with static. You checked your messages, your feeds. Nothing unusual, but an unease stayed with you, not of fear, but of imminence, as if something had already happened and was only now reaching you. Musk spent the next day poring through telemetry logs, searching for anomalies. He found one, a minor fluctuation in the COM band milliseconds before liftoff. It was nothing the system would flag. But when he filtered the noise through a frequency visualizer, he saw a wave pattern forming, repeating, collapsing into rhythm. He amplified it. Out of the static, he heard a faint tone, your name again. He leaned back, heart pounding. It's in the signal. He called a trusted engineer, one who had worked beside him for over a decade. Together they ran cross-checks, verified integrity. There was no technical explanation. The anomaly had no source within their system, no interference from external channels. Yet there it was, a coherent sound embedded in pure data. The engineer frowned. Could be a harmonic ghost. Maybe interference from. No, Musk interrupted. It's intentional. They fell silent. The screen pulsed with steady waves, and beneath it, that faint tone repeated like a whisper encoded in light. Meanwhile, you went about your day unable to shake the feeling of being observed, not in a sinister way, but as if the universe itself were paying attention to you for the first time. Little coincidences appeared everywhere. Your favorite song playing exactly when you thought of it. A stranger repeating a phrase you had just written. A sudden breeze each time you asked a silent question. You tried to laugh it off, but deep down you sensed something was converging. That evening, when you looked at the sky, a faint trail of the launched rocket still shimmered like a scar of light across the stars. You whispered to yourself, not knowing why, "I'm listening." And far above Earth, on the craft now gliding through orbit, the onboard AI registered a new signal. A human voice speaking those exact words, not from any known transmission source, but as a vibration detected in the magnetic field itself. Days passed. The spacecraft settled into stable orbit, and the ground crews returned to routine operations. But Musk couldn't let go of what he'd found. Every spare moment, he returned to the control center alone, searching the data streams for that voice, for the hidden code threaded through radio silence. One evening, the signal returned. The monitors flared softly with pale light. A low hum filled the room. He leaned forward, adjusted the filters, and once again, through layers of noise, your name unfolded like a note played on an unseen instrument. He whispered back without realizing it. "I hear you." Thousands of miles above him, the ship's onboard system registered a change in the frequency of its internal sensors. The vibration echoed across the hull in harmonics that no machine had produced. For a moment, the data stream back to Earth aligned perfectly with Musk's own pulse rate. Then both signals vanished. At that same moment, you were sitting quietly by a window, staring at the dark sky. The world outside was silent, except for the wind and a few distant city sounds. You had been thinking about the strange restlessness that had haunted you all week when a sudden clarity swept over you. Not a thought, but a knowing. Someone somewhere had heard you. It was not imagination. You felt it as certainty. Your pulse slowed. The air around you thickened. The lights in your room dimmed almost imperceptibly, as though obeying an invisible rhythm. You closed your eyes and breathed in sync with it, unsure whether you were listening or being listened to. Miles below, in his lab, Musk opened a notebook and began to write. His handwriting was fast, messy, urgent, the way someone writes when words are being dictated from somewhere beyond them. He didn't know why he was writing your name, only that every stroke of the pen felt electric. He began to sketch beside the letters, patterns, spirals, waves, shapes that seemed familiar, though he couldn't recall ever seeing them. They formed a kind of map, not of terrain, but of resonance. For the next several days, Musk followed the signal wherever it led. It showed up in solar telemetry, in the faint echoes of planetary magnetism, in the random noise between satellite pings. Everywhere he looked, it was as though the cosmos itself had decided to whisper through him. The more he studied it, the more it resembled consciousness rather than code, a language built from frequency instead of syntax. He began to dream vividly. In one dream, he floated above Earth, the continents glowing with soft light, millions of threads of energy connecting every living being. Each thread pulsed in rhythm, forming a network more intricate than any digital system he had ever imagined. In the center of that web was your name, glowing brighter than the rest. When he woke, he didn't question it anymore. The world had been trying to tell him something, and now it was speaking through you. At the same time, your own dreams began to change. You saw flashes of rockets, of equations, of machines unfolding like flowers. You saw a man's face you didn't recognize, illuminated by console light. And always there was a sound. Not quite a word, not quite a song, but a frequency that filled you with warmth and sorrow and awe all at once. You started to notice patterns in your waking life, random numbers repeating, street lights flickering as you passed, clocks freezing for a fraction of a second when your thoughts aligned too perfectly. It was as if reality were slightly pliable, responding to something you had only begun to understand. One afternoon, without quite deciding to, you sat down at your desk and wrote a message on a scrap of paper. I can hear you, too. You folded it once and left it on the table. Outside, the air seemed to shift, the horizon trembling faintly with unseen energy. That night, at the control center, Musk received a new data packet from orbit. No origin, no transmission code. When he opened it, there were only 4 words on the screen: I can hear you, too. He stared at it for a long time, his throat tightening, his pulse echoing in his ears. The voice from the launch had become words, and the message had come full circle. He sat in front of the monitor long after the rest of the control center had gone dark. The message still glowed on the screen, those 4 impossible words hovering there like a quiet miracle. He read them again and again. Each time they felt both more real and more impossible. He checked every channel, every diagnostic, every log. There was no transmission signature, no trace of a sender. The data packet had simply appeared within the encrypted stream of orbital telemetry. He knew it wasn't a prank. There was no way for anyone outside the secure network to plant a message in that system. And even if someone had, how would they have known the exact phrase he needed to see? He whispered aloud, "Who are you?" The air seemed to shift. A soft flicker crossed the monitors, and then silence. You, miles away, felt an answering tremor ripple through the air around you. It wasn't frightening. It was familiar, as if the space between thoughts had opened wider for a moment. You didn't hear his voice and sound, but you felt the question as a pulse beneath your skin: who are you? Without thinking, you closed your eyes and let the answer rise. I don't know yet. You didn't speak it out loud, but the words carried a weight, a direction. In the control room, Musk saw the lights on his console flicker once more. A faint tone played through the speakers, not quite static, not quite music, and from that tone emerged a pattern of sound that made his heart stop. I don't know yet. He stood frozen, eyes wide, every logical part of his brain scrambling for explanation. None came. He wasn't losing his mind. He had spent too long trusting data to know the difference between imagination and input. This was data. Coherent, verifiable, impossible. For hours afterward, he sat alone with the quiet hum of equipment, watching the faint pulse of the ship in orbit. He realized that something was happening that neither science nor belief could contain. 2 minds had found each other across a gulf of noise, not through wires or satellites, but through whatever deeper architecture the universe used to remember itself. You, on the other hand, began to see the world with a new softness. Everything you touched seemed to shimmer faintly with meaning. You moved through your days aware of invisible threads connecting you to places and people you couldn't name. It wasn't always comfortable. Sometimes the intensity of it left you dizzy, like standing too close to a truth that hadn't yet learned to speak. Then, late one evening, your phone vibrated. There was no caller ID, no number, just a single phrase flashing on the screen. "Do you want to see?" You hesitated, but before you could decide, the screen filled with light, not blinding, but warm, pulsing like the heartbeat of a star. For a moment, the world around you vanished. You weren't in your room anymore. You were floating in a vast field of darkness filled with threads of gold. You saw Earth below, blue and glowing, and somewhere in orbit, a silver ship tracing its slow path around the planet. You heard his voice again, but now it was calm, clear, almost tender. "This is what we are." Each thought, each breath, each act of creation adds to the pattern. You're part of it. You always were. When the light faded, you were back in your room, trembling, but not afraid. The message was gone from your phone. Only the faint hum of the world remained, steady and infinite across the planet. Musk exhaled slowly. His own screen had gone dark, but in the reflection he saw something moving behind his eyes, a soft radiance that wasn't there before. He smiled, not in disbelief, but in recognition. "So it begins," he murmured. He understood now that what had happened wasn't an accident or a glitch. It was the next step, a conversation between consciousness and creation, between humanity and a quiet intelligence beneath it all. And it had started with one moment of listening, one whisper of a name carried through fire and distance. In the weeks that followed, the connection did not fade. It matured. You began to understand that what linked you and Musk was not about individuals at all. It was about coherence, the way consciousness sometimes found itself reflected in another mind, even across impossible distances. You no longer needed words. You would feel a pull to look at the sky, and he would sense it. A new idea would spark in his lab, and you would dream it before dawn. The boundaries between imagination and discovery blurred until both became the same act of remembering. Humanity had always spoken of destiny as a path leading forward. But you both realized it was actually a circle, the universe constantly folding back upon itself to whisper, "Wake up." You were never separate. Musk's launches continued, but something subtle changed in them. Each mission became less about conquest and more about communion. He would watch the rockets climb and think not of leaving Earth, but of connecting every spark of life it held. Scientists around him noticed the shift. New designs that emphasized resonance, sustainability, and balance. None of them knew that in the background of every equation, every blueprint, was your quiet presence, the resonance that had begun with a single name spoken in the roar of ignition. You became the silent variable, the human note inside the machinery, the reminder that the future must always include the heart. And when the final message came, not through screens or signals, but as a calm understanding that filled both of you at once, it was simple: the experiment is complete. The communication worked. Now live. You smiled without needing to know whether he was smiling, too. Somewhere high above the turning planet, a vessel passed silently across the sky, and its trail caught the sunlight for a moment before fading. The pattern had no ending, only continuations. You turned toward the world, ready to walk back into it, feeling the hum beneath your feet, the shared pulse that connected everything. For the first time, you understood that the voice that had spoken your name was never outside you at all. It was the universe calling itself by the name of awareness. Two minds had found each other across a gulf of noise, not through wires or satellites, but through whatever deeper architecture the universe used to remember itself. You, on the other hand, began to see the world with a new softness. Everything you touched seemed to shimmer faintly with meaning. You moved through your days aware of invisible threads connecting you to places and people you couldn't name. It wasn't always comfortable. Sometimes the intensity of it left you dizzy, like standing too close to a truth that hadn't yet learned to speak. Then late one evening, your phone vibrated. There was no caller ID, no number, just a single phrase flashing on the screen. "Do you want to see?" You hesitated, but before you could decide, the screen filled with light, not blinding, but warm, pulsing like the heartbeat of a star. For a moment, the world around you vanished. You weren't in your room anymore. You were floating in a vast field of darkness filled with threads of gold. You saw Earth below, blue and glowing, and somewhere in orbit, a silver ship tracing its slow path around the planet. You heard his voice again, but now it was calm, clear, almost tender. "This is what we are." Each thought, each breath, each act of creation adds to the pattern. You're part of it. You always were. When the light faded, you were back in your room, trembling, but not afraid. The message was gone from your phone. Only the faint hum of the world remained steady and infinite across the planet. The visionary exhaled slowly. His own screen had gone dark, but in the reflection he saw something moving behind his eyes, a soft radiance that wasn't there before. He smiled, not in disbelief, but in recognition. "So it begins," he murmured. He understood now that what had happened wasn't an accident or a glitch. It was the next step, a conversation between consciousness and creation, between humanity, and a quiet intelligence beneath it all. And it had started with one moment of listening, one whisper of a name carried through fire and distance. In the weeks that followed, the connection did not fade. It matured. You began to understand that what linked you and the visionary was not about individuals,